There's some kind of anomaly in the Atlantic Ocean near the Bermuda Triangle. David Sereda has been looking at this. The FAA has been advising pilots to stay out of the area. So we'll talk with him about that, this breaking story on Coast to Coast AM. Okay, welcome back to Coast. David Sereda is a space scientist, physicist, economist, and spiritual explorer, as well as an ecologist. And he has uncovered a story today. He was talking to our producer, Lisa, and said this is very serious stuff, magnetic anomalies in the Bermuda Triangle. So let's get David on. We'll talk to him this hour. We'll take some calls with you and David as well. David, welcome back. What is going on?
Oh, good to be here, George.
Thank you.
There has been a whole series of events leading up to this, event and near or around the Bermuda Triangle that the FAA has issued a safety advisory claiming that the military is doing testing in this 700-mile diameter circle that extends all the way into Georgia, Florida, North and South Carolina, and way out into the Atlantic. And, they do testing, what are known as GPS, global positioning satellite testing from time to time. But this one has got everybody's attention because it's the area where it's occurring. There are magnetic anomalies occurring that are not consistent with the GPS testing, by far not consistent. And it goes all the way back to December 21st of this year on the U.S. Geological Survey website, where we measure earthquakes with sensors that are located all over the planet. Normally, when you get an earthquake, you get a strong signal on a sensor near that quake, and a weak, very weak, or no signal, depending on how far away the earthquake sensors are placed. But on December 21st, all the sensors all over the planet all went off at the same time. Now, not at an earthquake scale, but an evenly distributed vibration that struck the entire planet. And I went to the U.S. Geological Survey website, and I grabbed a screenshot of it because they don't save these things. And you can clearly see it different than regular earthquake activity, where there's a strong signal, then weak signals, or no signals. So what appears to have happened is the whole solar system was rung like a great vibrational energy as our solar system is doing 11 million miles a day around the Milky Way galaxy. So the next thing that happens is within days, a storm erupts on Saturn that is the biggest storm we've ever seen on Saturn, proving that the solar system had entered a new energy field. And then within days, literally on New Year's Day, we had all of the reports of birds dying. And in one of the reports of the birds dying in Arkansas, there was a satellite imagery where we can see on radar a very, very dense, high reflectivity region right where the birds had apparently fallen out of the sky. And this high reflectivity region was suspected to be not ordinary cloud cover, fairly high altitude, around 1,500 feet. And this was from the local TV broadcast there. And there were theories that magnetic anomalies in the area that we're talking about in Arkansas were forcing, or like vortexes, forcing noctilucent clouds, which are becoming more and more common, and in the 1800s were virtually non-existent. These high-altitude clouds, which are fairly toxic, are being condensed and forced down to lower elevations, where the theory states that it's killing certain species. Well, after all that happened, we start to see that, the understanding, the clear understanding of what a pole shift actually may be. Because on going slightly back before we come to our major event here near the Bermuda Triangle, we see the stories in Time magazine and all over the media about the 2-day early sunrise in Greenland.
Right, which was just strange.
Which was just incredibly strange, and there's no way that in fact, most of the astronomers in Time magazine said they didn't believe the melting of the ice theory could explain it, because you'd have to melt thousands of feet of ice in thickness in a single year, and that just doesn't happen for that to occur. But what I love about some of the research I did is that the lone scientist who pulls out his compass in Greenland, in the town where the sun normally rises every year on the 13th of January, where it comes out of that, it's kind of like you have the night sun in the summer where the sun never sets, and in the winter there's a period where you never see the sun for as much as a month and a half, and depending on how far north you live. Well, in this town, it's supposed to rise, as it does every year, for the first time on the 13th of January. His compass says that magnetic north is 3 to 4 degrees off.
Already.
3 to 4 degrees off from where it should be.
Yeah.
And then on the 14th of January, it goes back to normal, which suggests that if the sun rose early, there wasn't just a magnetic shift of 3 to 4 degrees, and each degree is about 67 miles on a 360-degree circle, representing the 24,000 and some odd miles around the circumference of the Earth. So 3 degrees is a lot, right? 4 degrees is 30 miles.
And it's still early in the game, David.
And it's still early in the game. And so what happens is, and that's what I like about the lone scientists. I personally trust these lone scientists almost more, I hate to say it, than NASA for telling us the truth about what's going on. Because when it happened, nobody could solve it. In fact, there are reports that state that as the ice melts in Greenland, the Earth's mantle pushes up, and therefore the mountains get higher, not lower, as the ice melts. So they were obviously giving us, a quick wash of a story that wasn't true. And so then, I noticed that, and then you think, okay, what's going on with all the weather, the colder air masses?
And tie the Mayan calendar, December 21st, 2012 date into this.
Yes. And also the head Mayan priest, Don Alejandro, says the beginning, or what they believe is the end of the calendar, is actually the 28th or 29th of October of this year, of 2011. So all this is happening. Now, before we get to this big, news story, try to see yourself as a physical magnet, because we have electricity moving through our nervous system, our wiring. We have a north and a south pole. Now, the Earth has a magnetic north and a magnetic south pole. In fact, during the last pole shift that NASA says occurred as much as 700,000 years ago, it had a previous location for its magnetic north and south pole. Now, what I understand in my own laboratory about doing experiments on a miniature pole shift is that if you have a radio transmitter like the sun transmitting powerful electromagnetic signals to a magnet, the magnetic field tells the magnet which way to move. So the Earth itself was previously thought to be a very weak magnet, because on the surface of the Earth, if you take your little compass with a tiny little magnet in it, the south magnet attracts to the North Pole. Well, it's actually labeled north, but NASA says the North Pole is actually a south magnet. So if you take a strong magnet, just a little magnet, and hold it near your compass, you can spin the compass needle around. And these are the kind of things people used to report in the Bermuda Triangle. So I started to realize that if Earth had a previous magnetic north-south, when you program a physical magnet, which the Earth is, and it was previously thought to be a weak magnet, new scientists have actually measured for the first time in history the core magnetic strength of the planet itself. And at the core, it's 25 Gauss, which is not a powerful magnet, but it's certainly not as weak as they previously thought. And that means a magnetic field programs the magnet, and the memory of that magnetic field stays there. And therefore, when you have a pole shift, as we had, 600,000 or 700,000 years ago, the old magnetic north and south are still programmed in the magnet. Now, when the only thing that's likely to cause a pole shift is a strong anomaly from the sun, because the sun produces much stronger magnetic fields than the Earth itself and the Earth's magnet. And with the magnetic spots and magnetic solar flares we've seen from the sun in the last couple of years, just recently during solar magnetic ejecta, scientists at private physics conferences had noted that the magnetic North Pole moved as much as 500 miles just momentarily, right? So now 500 miles is less than 10 degrees. Now this is where it gets really interesting, because on NASA's own website, and there's a link to this very page on your site right now, people can see this, it was known that in the 20th century, which is up to the year 2000, 1997, 98, 99, 2000, that was inside of the 20th century, the end of it. The natural drift rate of the magnetic north and south pole, the North Pole was drifting towards the true north of the physical Earth magnet at a rate of 10 kilometers per day, which is about 6.7 miles per day. Per year. 6.7 miles per year. Now, suddenly, in the 21st century, it's now 25 miles per year.
It's sped up by 4? It's
sped up by a factor of 4. Now that is, and the Earth's magnetic field has weakened 10%. And as the magnetic field gets weaker, it's easier to knock the physical magnet over. So what I did in my lab is I have a radio transmitter and I have a north-south magnet. And once the vibrations in my transmitter flip, the physical magnet flips. You see, it tells it what to do. It moves it around. So what's happening is that the information in the magnetic field from the sun, basically, the more the magnetic field starts to drift away from where it currently is, eventually, when you cross these magnetic field lines, what are known as the lines of force, the physical magnet will suddenly move and cause even a 10-degree physical pole shift would be utterly devastating. But before that happens, the magnetic fields, and you can see this in NASA's illustrations on your website right now, the magnetic field starts to form vortex funnels or unstable new displacements of the north and south field. You start to get these vortexes all over the planet. Now
are they dangerous?
Well, they can be. They can produce magnetic anomalies, including forcing these noctilucent clouds to slam down into lower elevations and cause possibly some toxic gases and some animal deaths. Could be explained by this. But where it gets really amazing is suddenly the FAA announces, and this is an FAA official safety advisory, it's a flight advisory, that between January 20th and February 22nd, a whole month, in this giant 750-mile wide diameter circle, that they're going to be doing military testing, which could be affecting the pilot's GPS system. And
they're starting to admit this.
You're saying that, okay, you guys do testing you've done testing in the past, but why would you put a major flight path in jeopardy for that long when all of these commercial airline pilots rely on their global positioning satellites? Well, what starts to happen is, once again, the lone scientists, the ham radio operators, start listening on their radios for signals, and they start to hear and actually measure magnetic field anomalies in the given area. In fact, where the FAA deems the center of this field testing range is actually not the true center where the ham radio operator detects where the signals are really coming from. And GPS signals and GPS testing signals are so weak, they're determined to be weaker than a 25-watt light bulb from 10,000 miles away, which means they're almost non-existent. In fact, it's very easy to block a GPS.
Now, what's the significance of this, David?
The significance of this is the ham radio operator detects a massive signal in the many, many megawatt range in his radio equipment, and there's no pulse in the signal. And, of course, all radio transmissions and all GPS systems are pulse systems.
Right.
So he's saying, what is this? In fact, more and more testing is done on the anomaly in the magnetic field, and they clearly see the structure. You know how these guys can actually listen to the sounds. They're so good at listening to sounds and structures. You can hear the difference between an earth whistler, which sounds like birds singing in the magnetic field lines of the Earth, and you can hear a true radio signal. You can hear structure and information in a man-made signal versus a natural signal. And this particular ham radio operator says this is not man-made, which means it's not military, even though their GPS is encrypted, and it's definitely not a GPS signal because those are so weak you can barely detect them with a radio apparatus. So The question is now, I mean, this discovery of this magnetic field anomaly virtually could be buried by this supposed FAA testing, so that if anomalies occur within the region of the Bermuda Triangle and through Florida and all the way into Atlanta, Georgia, and all the way up into the Carolinas and off into the Gulf region, they would say, oh, that's just the FAA testing we're doing as a cover story.
Would these anomalies always be there?
The idea and the mysticism around the Bermuda Triangle leads me to believe that the Earth previously, as I mentioned before, had a different north and south pole, the magnetic north and south pole, and therefore a different position in its physical north and south pole before the last pole shift. Now, NASA says these pole shifts are due approximately every 300,000 years.
So this is happening fast.
This is happening fast. So if this is the new positioning or one of these vortices of these strong magnetic field lines forming because the Earth is getting ready to find its new magnetic north or south position, then holy cow, watch out. But if it's a magnetic vortex anomaly that will exist and then disappear because Earth doesn't yet know where the new position is going to be, then it could be the memory. In fact, the whole Bermuda Triangle phenomena could be the memory of the previous north and south pole that existed. And you can do this yourself. I mean, you can take raw iron that has not been magnetized, or nickel or other or neodymium material that are magnetic materials, and you can program the magnetic field in your magnet any way you want, a north and a south pole.
Will our little compasses still work? The compass I used to have when I was in Boy Scouts, will they still work?
I have a good one here I just got recently to watch it myself. Well, they work now, but if you're watching them 24/7 when these solar flares hit, you can see these wobbles.
They're all over the place, huh?
So the problem is, if the magnetic field keeps drifting and it's getting faster and faster, as soon as it crosses a magnetic field line, the physical magnet has to chase it. And that means the physical Earth moves very, very, very suddenly.
Now, what's the downside for us as human beings? What could happen?
Well, the downside is if you have a real physical pole shift, even 10 degrees suddenly, you would have earthquakes and tsunamis, and coastal regions would be...
Earth changes, climate changes, everything.
But one of the, I always like to think of the positive. Okay, we think, this has definitely happened before. In fact, if you follow Graham Hancock, as you do,
sure,
he's clearly proven that
these are cycles.
Great cycles 12,000 years ago that buried whole civilizations in hundreds of feet of, even hundreds and hundreds of feet of water, that he has absolutely proven. So we know it's happened in the past. We know it can happen. We know it's sudden. But new studies are saying that, well, wait a minute, what they didn't know in the past, and they didn't have a George Norrie, 12,000 years ago, who was reaching millions of people in a single night, that because we're all little magnets, and we know this, I mean, using these things called squid magnetometers, which are so sensitive that they literally measure quantum magnetic fields on the tiniest scale, they've been able to measure the magnetic field of the human heart, the human energy field, a plant, a tree. You can actually see the numbers with these devices. So we're all magnetic. And we all have a north and south pole as well. And even if we're tilted just a few degrees, as I believe we just were, then our consciousness would suddenly get shifted, and therefore, sociologically, we could react suddenly, which could explain Tunisia, Egypt, and now the King of Jordan. Everybody wants a new president right now all of a sudden because there has been this little bit of a wobble in it, which affected our consciousness. But conversely, if we all join together and lens on this great radio show and say, okay, we know in the quantum universe, as soon as you observe something, as soon as you observed an event before it happened, because you can see it coming, you've already changed it. In fact, we're so powerful in the millions of magnets, which we are, could we meditate together now that we're aware that we could be beginning a pole shift?
David, I want to ask you if this will put us into another ice age when I come back, plus we'll take some phone calls with you. David Sereda, our guest this hour on Coast to Coast AM. Well, Coast to Coast would not be the same without you, so thank you Those of you listening on your favorite radio stations across North America, Coast Insiders, Streamlink members, thank you for all you do. XM Satellite 165. Then the various chat rooms and groups, nighthawkzone.com, folks. Happy anniversary coming up again, isn't it? Imaginative Worlds Into Infinity, the National Radio Club, Sorcery IRC, the MySpace groups, Yahoo Chats, Northern Kentucky Paranormal Group, Above Top Secret, our Facebook group, Twitter group, Hollywood Ghost Hunters, the SoCal UFO Meetup Group, and Greg R. Cook in St. Louis. Thank you for keeping Coast to Coast AM the number one rated program at night in the world. David, this rapid movement of the pole, does that mean we could hit an immediate ice age? I keep thinking of that mammoth that was found frozen with food still in its mouth.
Right. Yeah, I tell that story all the time, actually. Well, when you understand experientially how a physical magnet responds to a magnetic field, which is what the sun induces with these, giant magnetic spots on the sun, is it basically tells it what to do. And if it tells it to move 10 degrees suddenly, and I believe the physical Earth responded to the magnetic field on the 11th of January when the sun rose 2 days early, which is really interesting because it was 1 p.m. local time on January the 11th, which is 1/11 of 2011, that the sun rose early, which is almost a mystical 11/11 sequence. And so to answer your question about this suddenness of the ice age, if the physical Earth moves suddenly, by as much as 20 or 30 degrees, there's no doubt that the cold air mass is forced south almost in such a short period of time that it would, like the ice age, it would freeze everything instantly, and there would be no time to stop chewing. And so you'd be caught in your tracks there, frozen in the ice with your pizza in your mouth.
It could happen.
It could happen. And, I'm looking at these magnetic anomalies because I see how a magnetic shift could lead to a pole shift. And I'm not a big pole shift person. I'm not one of those people who wants it to happen. But when you look at the signs, the cold temperatures, the record-breaking cold temperatures in Phoenix, Arizona, they broke all records in the last couple of days. You've got all of these phenomena happening with animal species. And we just look at the birds that fell on the highway or in human communities. I spent half my life crawling around in the wilderness up by Alaska and northern British Columbia, and there could be birds falling out of the sky everywhere. We just don't see that because we don't spend much time out there. And now there's this report in Florida of the 100,000+ sharks migrating, and this helicopter pilot is in utter amazement because he's seen these spinner sharks in large numbers before, but never in numbers like this. And the question is, we're talking about a magnetic anomaly off the coast of Florida, and are they responding to that magnetic field? Can they sense it? And, of course, we know that birds and fish are sensitive to magnetic field changes. And that could also be leading birds and fish in migratory paths that are not correct for water temperatures, and that's why a lot of them are suddenly dying. There are people out there who say HAARP is doing everything. They're creating the magnetic anomaly off the coast of Florida. And, HAARP is using microwaves, and microwaves, as strong as they are for radio and television transmissions, by the time they leave the power source and they bounce off the ionosphere and come back down, they've lost most of their strength. So I believe HAARP could manipulate weather, but I really don't believe HAARP could produce a pole shift. And when you get a shift in displacement of the Earth's magnetic field, and once it starts moving, the faster it moves, like this sudden acceleration of the drift rate of the North's magnetic pole by 4 times, that's a huge number. That's something we should all be looking at. And the way the mainstream news has reported all of this is very conservative. NASA
they don't understand it, David.
They don't understand it because, of course, NASA's never seen a pole shift happen before. They don't know. They act like they're such experts about everything. Oh, we would know.
Unless they're a time traveler, they wouldn't have seen the last one.
Exactly, unless they can
Hey,
travel.
let's take a few calls here for you, David. Let's go to Travis in Geneva, Florida. You're up with us. First-time caller. Hi, Travis.
Hello, sir. How are you doing tonight?
Good. Thanks for getting through. Go ahead.
Thank you. I would like to know if maybe the pole shift might be caused by the possible passing through our solar system of a possible companion star or Nibiru or the 10th planet. Or
Great question. David,
whatever.
What do you think of this? Maybe a binary star system, something?
There's no doubt, because stars and planets all have magnetic fields, and let alone gravity, which may be related to magnetism anyway in the end. There's no doubt that could influence us, but there's no greater force than the fact that we're moving 11 million miles a day around the Milky Way galaxy. All we have to do is enter a supercharged particles of energy that transfer their energy to the sun. The sun's magnetic field conversely spits a magnetic force towards the planet. And our magnet, the Earth, is only 25 Gauss at the core. It's a very weak magnet, but it's not terribly weak. Our bodies are super weak magnetic fields, so it doesn't take a lot to cause a serious wobble. We're not quite as stable as we like to believe. Although there are very, very powerful magnetic energies in supernova and extra, stellar events. If we pass through one of those supercharged fields from a previous event, then that could obviously happen. But a distant planet like Nibiru, which I believe could exist, it's a good story, and there's some good arguments in ancient cosmology for it being a real story. It's probably too far away to cause a pole shift right now. The most likely candidate is our sun in its powerful magnetic field.
Okay, next up we go to Blair in Sedona, Arizona. Hi, Blair. How are you?
Thanks, George. Hi, David.
Hi, Blair.
Hey, 1994, NASA sent the spacecraft Ulysses out to measure the magnetic activity of the sun at the North and South poles, and the recorded readings were exactly the same for both the North and South poles. In other words, the sun lost its polarity, and now the sun is emitting a new type of light. It's becoming a helium sun, not a hydrogen sun, and I'm noticing it getting whiter and brighter myself. What do you think?
Well, the sun produces the fusion of hydrogen and manufactures helium. So as any sun or star gets older, it's going to start to build up more helium, which it then conversely fuses helium and hydrogen. But actually, the data I have on the Ulysses spacecraft shows a difference in the North and South Pole, so I'd have to double-check that, Blair. And
there's no doubt, though, the solar system, David, is heating up.
Oh, I mean, you can see it everywhere. I mean, like I said, there's a lot of different physicists, and Claude Swanson's one of them, who pointed me in this direction, that if you see changes evenly distributed throughout the solar system that are sudden, then it means we've entered a new energy field. And an energy field affects every magnetic field, which means every living thing there is changing. DNA is changing rapidly. We have proof that DNA can change in ultra-weak magnetic fields because, let alone a strong change in the field. So life is changing, consciousness changes in these fields. But the most amazing thing to me is that you think of 6 billion little magnets that are less than a billionth of a Gauss each. But if you come together and you form even one Gauss in human magnetic field strength, the surface of the Earth is at 1 Gauss or half a Gauss. It depends on where you are on the planet. So that means collectively, if we tell our magnetic fields to talk to the Earth's magnetic field, there's no doubt we have the power to change all this. And maybe this is the universe's way of saying, okay, you guys are ready now. We've proven this enough in quantum physics that the mind is the greatest power, and Max Planck, the Nobel Prize winner, believed this. So if you want to survive the next millennium, you're going to have to do this. You're going to have to take this seriously. You're going to see the signs of a pole shift happening, but you can actually affect it if you unify your consciousness in a single consolidated lens, and you say, okay, let's make this pole shift smooth rather than bumpy. And I really believe that we can do that. I've just seen so much evidence of that.
British Columbia International Line, it's Chris's turn on Coast to Coast. Hi, Chris. Chris? There is no Chris on the international.
British Columbia, that's my hometown.
Really?
Well, I spent a lot of time up there, yeah.
Let's go to Memphis, Tennessee. It's Bo's turn. Hi, Bo.
Hey, how are you doing?
Good, thank you.
you kind of touched on your last comment about how these magnetic shifts will affect humans. You were talking about fish dropping dead and things like that, but I haven't experienced human chi and things like that, definite magnetic reactions to the human spirit. I just wanted to ask your guest what you thought about what these magnetic shifts might actually do to, humans.
Well, scientists previously thought that energy told matter what to do. Einstein said the fields of energy determine the order or chaos in the material systems.
Right.
But new quantum research says there's a hierarchy of something beyond energy, and that's information, which is ultimately consciousness. Information tells energy what to do, and the information in that energy tells the matter what to do. So it's not just exercise.
Spirit telling matter than the other way around.
Yeah, it's not just the chi or the adrenaline or the force of magnetic energy in the body. It's how our mind tells that energy what to do. So it's really the information, which is so subtle, that tells the energy what to do. So if we talk to the energy rather than the body, then the body of material will follow. But if we're all in disagreement and disorder in our thoughts, we'll all just cancel each other's energies out. We really have to be focused.
Isn't that kind of an inevitability of the human race? We're all going to kind of cancel positive and negative energies out?
Well, that's what we do.
Positive to this.
You're right. I mean, that's what we do. We haven't attained singularity yet. But if we can attain singularity for even an hour or a couple of days or even better, a month, we're all going to agree that even though we disagree about politics and religion and God, let's agree that we live on a planet and we're all little magnets, and if we get together and we focus on this pole shift thing, then we can change it. And there's no doubt that can happen. In fact, we've seen psychics take their hands and move the compass needle with their hands at a distance. I don't know if you've seen video of Uri Geller and people working with a compass. It's a very weak magnet. So if one person can move a little magnet, which is controlled by a very weak magnetic field around the Earth, then clearly thousands to millions of us can affect a global change.
David, with this shift, is there anything that concerns you about it?
Well, there's no doubt that I've done this experiment in my lab over and over and over again, and I really understand that the Earth is an iron magnet in the core, both liquid and solid. And what scares me the most is, I have a daughter who's 3 months old, and I think of her future and the future world. I'm very happy with my life at, just about 50 years old and what I've done. And I just think of all the new children, and I just pray for them that if there is going to be a pole shift, that it's not utterly so devastating that millions or billions of people have to die. I just pray that. But I really understand that it can really happen. And what I'm interested in, one of the things we can do tonight, and we've done this before, is ask people who live in the Bermuda Triangle, Florida, Georgia, all of those areas that we mentioned in this FAA report, get your compasses out, and ham radio operators, all of you, start listening for an anomaly in the radio spectrum. And if you detect something in your compass that, put your compass and glue it to a table or the floor and don't move it. Find magnetic north and magnetic south. And if it changes, write me an email at davidsereda@hotmail.com.
You expect it to change, though, don't you?
Well, I think there could be a lot of anomalies going on in there, and I want to see what the compasses do and what the ham radio operators are telling us, because I trust them more than I trust NASA. I've known too many government scientists tell me personally that they were paid to falsify and lie about data and reports. And for that reason, and I've known scientists who have quit government jobs for that reason, because they're tired of lying and giving false testimony on data. So those are what you really need. The data we need is the compasses, and we need the data from the ham radio operators looking for anomalies and sounds and vibrational energies that are not normal from your personal experience. And if I get enough of those reports, I'll send them to the producers of the show, and we'll see.
Let's go to Justin in New Mexico. Justin, you're up with us.
Good morning, gentlemen.
Hi.
I'm along those same lines. I'm hoping that, if anything from a polar shift does happen, that it would be minimal, such as crust shifts or anything like that. But I was wondering, would there be an effect on electrical circuits? Like, would all of a sudden from, airplanes to cell phones, everything has to be rewired? And I'll gladly take that question off air.
All right, you got it.
Well, theoretically, a lot of our cell phones are transmitted from satellites that are not going to be affected. I'm talking about even a 10-degree shift here. There are people who are talking about a complete pole reversal, which could take hundreds or thousands of years to happen. But even a sudden couple of degree movement could cause some very large earthquakes, not necessarily the end of the world. I don't know. I have no way of knowing, because we've never seen this happen before in the human species, whether this will be very, very short and very violent and very sudden. But we do know these things have happened in the past. At that point, if you do have tsunamis and massive 2,000-foot waves, the cell phones are, it would be nice to have some communication and know what's going on around the planet if you're in one of the safe zones. But I really ultimately don't know how bad or how smooth this could be.
Well, let's go to California. Lynn, let's see if we can get you in here. Go ahead, Lynn.
Okay, well, as I'm listening to this while I was waiting on the phone, another question. Well, I have a couple questions that have popped up. One, we're asking people around the Bermuda Triangle to, get their compasses, place them in a safe place and let you know what happens. But the question on that is, why just the Bermuda Triangle? I live in California, and I'm seeing a lot of animal changes just around the San Andreas Fault.
And people changes.
Yes. And people change, and I have a daughter in Seattle, and she's on the big Cascade line up there, and she's seeing changes. And
let's get your answer, Dave. We're almost out of time.
That's a great question. Get your compasses wherever you are, and if you glue it to the table, you find the exact north and south, and just watch it. And if you see a change, take a picture of it and send it to me. And tell me where you are. That will really help us know if there are changes happening in the Earth's magnetic field.
David, what's your website these days?
My website is voiceentertainment.net and lightstreamtechnologies.com.
Whatever is changing, David, it's changing rapidly, and we really don't know what direction, and I don't mean direction in terms of compass type, but the direction as far as our lives are concerned, it's going to go, do we?
It's really changing rapidly. It's incredible just watching what's going on right now.
You scared about the future?
Well, I'm not afraid of death, so I'm not afraid of the future.
Well, let's hope we don't have to go that far.
Yeah, let's hope so.
All right, thanks, David.
Thank you, George.
It's David Sereda giving us an update on anomalies in the Atlantic Ocean near the Bermuda Triangle. But as he has just said, this is probably happening all around the planet. Hey, when I come back in just a moment, it's going to be full open lines. Plus, we're going to open up the Believe It or Not hotline. I'll give you that phone number when we come back. Anything in your life that you have seen where you shake your head and go, I can't believe it, or not, I'll be back.